What is going on, everybody? The first week of the NFL is officially in the books, so this is the most important time for fantasy football players, which is me and yourself. So in this video, I'm going to go over the entirety of the NFL week 1. I'm going to briefly cover every single one of these games, and there's timestamps all throughout the video, so if you want to find a specific game, you're going to be able to do it pretty easily. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this video of what we learned in every single one of these games in fantasy. Should we pick up players? Should we drop them? Should we trade them? Make sure to hit that follow button if you do get any kind of value. And our very first game to cover here is going to be the Falcons and Panthers game, and the big narrative here is the Falcons running backs in rookie Bijan Robinson. But Tyler Allgeier also had a role too. Tyler Allgeier was operating as the goal line back, having 2 touchdowns on the day, and had a little bit more usage than a lot of us expected from Bijan. With that being said, Allgeier did score more fantasy points on the week, but that is not exactly what we want to look for when we're evaluating these players, because Bijan did lead both of them in 2-minute drill snaps and 3rd down snaps, which pretty much is the important part of this. The meat and bones, if you'd say that. What do they call it? I guess that's the analogy. He also saw a good amount of receiving upside, which we really weren't expecting. He is still a top 5 running back in PPR leagues. That is not going to change no matter how much Allgeier got in this game. But rookies tend to start slow, especially running backs. Expect Bijan to get more and more of this volume every single week as the season goes on. So if you're going to buy low on Bijan, now is the time to do it. But the good news is, in a game that was pretty close between the Falcons and Panthers, Bijan still saw a majority of the work when the script was more pass heavy. This Falcons team is going to continue to be a run first team. They ran on 54% of the plays. That is a pretty good amount, but that does severely cap Drake London and Kyle Pitts, as we saw in their performances this week. Drake London, 1 target, 0 receptions. That is absolutely atrocious. Kyle Pitts, again, didn't do much. The funny thing is, though, Drake London ran the most amount of routes and was on the field for 90% of the plays, but still didn't finish with any fantasy points, and that is scary. I think we might have to start panicking on London just a little bit because of the sheer passing volume in this offense. It's not going to be a lot, and most of the passing volume that's going to be in the offense is going to go to their running backs, as we saw in week 1. But that does cap the upside of Pitts and London. I would tell you to sell them, but they didn't score any points, so you got to wait a couple weeks. Kyle Pitts should be on your roster, though, just because the tight end pool is so terrible. He deserves a spot, even if he isn't the best option. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers side of this, which is a little bit more interesting in Miles Sanders. He was not the 3rd down workhorse back we thought he was going to be. If we just look at the snaps, Miles Sanders had 44 and Chuba had 28, nowhere near the split we were expecting. But the big concern here is that Chuba had 8 of the 3rd down snaps, and that's a lot. The reason 3rd down snaps are so important is because that's the running back that they're trusting the most. Now, maybe it's just because Sanders got to the team and they want to work him into the trust, but the coaching staff for the Panthers are a lot of the same coaching staff that he played with on the Eagles, so that does worry me a little bit. They're not trusting him. But Sanders was still efficient. He had 72 rushing yards and a bit of receiving work as well, so he's not a complete bust. I'm not saying he is. But if the Panthers are losing the majority of the games that they play in, which is going to be the inevitable truth, and Sanders isn't out on 3rd downs, that is kind of scary. I think Chuba could be an interesting pickup if you do have the Miles Sanders stack. Moving on to the Ravens and Texans game, this was a bit of an interesting one as well. Tough game for Dameon Pierce, but we knew this matchup was not great anyways. But outside of just the bad matchup, which we were expecting, Pierce was not the workhorse role. This was kind of a committee. I don't even think I can say kind of a committee. It was a full-blown committee. Pierce saw 31 snaps. Mike Boone surprisingly saw 25, and Devin Singletary saw 16. And this does raise a lot of questions about Dameon Pierce. He only saw 3 targets out of the backfield on 44 pass attempts for the game for CJ Stroud. That's not a terrible split for a running back that never really gets receiving work anyways, but we just thought he would get that high upside volume, but he's not. Can we blame most of this on the bad matchup and the pass-heavy script? Yes, but seeing 3 different running backs used in a game where they're trying to play catch-up is not good at all. I might look into trading him for a more reliable guy if I can. As for the Ravens side of things, again, a super unfortunate injury for J.K. Dobbins. I was really excited to watch him this year. He has a whole lot of upside, but he's going to be out with an Achilles injury for the whole season. I really wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens just cut ties with him completely. He's had a whole bunch of injuries, and with the running back market, the Giants didn't even want to sign Saquon, so I doubt they're going to waste a bunch of money on re-signing an injured running back. And I wouldn't race to pick up Gus Edwards or Justice Hill. I think this is just going to revert back to a committee, which we've seen in the past couple years. It's not going to be a valuable backfield with Lamar Jackson rushing a lot and a more pass-heavy offense. But Zay Flowers looked great. 10 targets, 78 yards. I still would refrain from going all in on these receivers if you want to trade for them, because Mark Andrews wasn't playing in this game. I think all of these wide receivers can be viable, but it's going to be a bit more of a hit or miss decision. So if you want to play the lottery on who's going to boom and bust every week, be my guest. Zay Flowers looks like he's going to be that guy, but I just don't know yet. But looking down to the Bengals and Browns game, I saw a line of Nick Chubb at 76.5 rushing yards for the entire game and thought, That is insanely low, and it turned out to be because he had over 100 rushing yards. So we absolutely smashed that with some free money over on Chalkboard. If you guys do want to get in on any of that, Chalkboard has their own player props, and they're doing discounts like every single day right now. So if you want to get in on that before it's too late, you can go over there and deposit using code Avery, and they will match your deposit up to $300, which no other site does. But that's just a bit of a side note. Nick Chubb wasn't used on third downs or the majority of passing downs though. And we kind of expected this. All offseason I was saying that Nick Chubb isn't going to garner every single carry and touch that Kareem Hunt had. And we saw that with Jerome Ford. Is he going to take all of Nick Chubb's value and make him a less valuable fantasy player? No, he's not, but he could be a viable backup. If you do have Nick Chubb, you should definitely handcuff him. And if Nick Chubb were to ever go down, he's going to be the workhorse just like Nick Chubb is. So maybe he's worth a spot. But looking into the Bengals, man, this was a disaster for everybody. Joe Burrow had one of the worst quarterback performances of his life this week. He couldn't even get 100 yards. We all know T. Higgins put up 0 fantasy points. Ja'Marr Chase, a really bad game for his standards as well. Now, anybody that's telling you they would have expected this is lying. Joe Burrow did miss a majority of the preseason and training camp with his calf injury. So if you can buy low on any of these Bengals players, 1000% try and do it. They are never going to be this low of a value ever again in the season. Definitely shoot for doing that. I know I am. But looking at the Jaguars-Colts game, there's a lot to talk about here. And I want to start this off with Calvin Ridley, who surprised me personally, and I'm sure a lot of you guys as well. After not playing football for almost 700 days, he came out here and had, I think, 100 yards in the first half. He looked like the clear wide receiver one, no doubt about it. If he can keep this up, he is going to smash his ADP for anybody that drafted him in the second or third round. On the other side, though, Christian Kirk, absolute stinker this game. If you guys have been watching these videos for a while, I had Christian Kirk in a do not draft video. I didn't trust it. He's playing majority in the slot this year, and he was not being used on 2 wide receiver sets at all. It was Zay Jones and Calvin Ridley, which is really surprising because, yes, Zay Jones had a breakout in the back end of the last season that they had, but Christian Kirk is the better wide receiver, and I can admit he is. This is really scary for Christian Kirk, though. I wouldn't drop him. He's still valuable on your team. Definitely something to monitor, though, because they were using Evan Ingram in place of Christian Kirk, and that's not a good sign. But looking at the Colts, what a game from Anthony Richardson. He had 40 rushing yards, which we expected. But what we didn't expect, he had over 200 passing yards on his first NFL game. And that was against a pretty decent Jaguars defense too. What this is really good for is Michael Pittman. He saw 11 targets and almost 100 yards on the day. Should we expect this level of production for both of these guys every week? Probably not, at least for the first bit of the season. But I quickly want to talk about Deion Jackson. This dude looked like absolute buns. When Zach Moss comes back, he is going to be the lead running back. Drop Deion Jackson if you have him. But going down to the Commanders and Cardinals game, I do want to start this off by saying it was an ugly game. The Commanders didn't play too good. They had a lot of self-inflicted errors. They did end up winning it though. But in this game, Terry had the lowest total fantasy points of every single wide receiver on this Commanders offense. But I want to tell you guys, do not panic on Terry McLaurin. He just came back from his turf toe injury a couple days before the game. He didn't really practice with the team leading up to this. I would not be worried. If you want, I think you can buy low on him. He's going to be one of the more risky guys because, again, he's probably going to be a bit boomer bust until we see what Sam Howell can really do and how he can consistently perform a wide receiver one finish. But, I mean, he only put up 5 points, and I'm sure the Terry owners are already sick of it compared to the last few years where he has been kind of like this. So if you want to give up a guy like Christian Kirk for him, by all means do it. Looking at the running backs for the Commanders, though, Brian Robinson looked like the clear RB1, and this was actually a bit surprising. Antonio Gibson only saw 4 carries on the day. He was getting a decent amount of usage in the beginning of the game until he fumbled, and then he didn't touch the ball for the remainder of it. And that was actually really surprising. I know he has a fumbling issue, but they completely put him in the doghouse for this one. This was a good script for the running back. They were running the ball out a lot to secure this win, and Brian Robinson had 19 of those carries. Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson are not maintaining their roles at all, which is what we wanted to come into this game looking for. Was Gibson going to get a majority of the work compared to last season? What was the split going to be? Gibson was absolutely shut out. Overall, I am staying away from this Commanders backfield. Brian Robinson might look like the guy to go get. I think he is, but I would not risk trading for him just in case he's not, because I mean, it's the Commanders offense. I would not be surprised if next week Gibson comes back and gets more carries or more targets. I'd rather just save you guys the headache and not trade for him or get him on your team. But looking at the Cardinals here, this was absolutely atrocious for them too. Their defense was pretty decent, but nobody's going to be startable on this team outside of James Conner and maybe Marquise Brown until Kyler Murray comes back. But moving over to the Saints and Titans game, Michael Thomas looked good in his very first game, which I'm very happy to see because I was telling you guys we need to be starting Michael Thomas where we can because there's no time where he's going to be more healthy than right now. But he's the clear wide receiver too. He's not going to overtake Chris Olave unless an injury happens. But 8 targets and 61 yards in the day is really good for him. Looking at the Titans side of this, it was a pretty confusing game for them. Ryan Tannehill looked absolutely atrocious. I would not be surprised. Actually, no, he's not going to play the entirety of the season. And I hope he doesn't, because this passing offense did not look good with him in there. But speaking of the running backs, Tyjae Spears outsnapped Derrick Henry. This is odd. Now, Henry still outtouched Spears 15 carries to 3 carries, but Derrick Henry is getting older, and that's just the truth. He might be coming out of his true workhorse role like he was earlier in his career and kind of slowing down a bit. Moving on to the 49ers and Steelers game. Again, another great game for the 49ers. All around, Brandon Ayuk was the clear wide receiver 1 on this team. He had a monstrous game. I've been screaming from the rooftops not to get Deebo Samuel in any of your drafts. And this was the exact reason why. Ever since Christian McCaffrey came to this team, he's just been taking all of the workload from Deebo, and he's less of a dual threat guy now. But speaking of CMC, that dude had 100 yards on the ground and was involved in the receiving game like always. But this is actually more of an interesting case than I thought it was going to be, because Christian McCaffrey's usage was not the same as it was last season with Elijah Mitchell. His usage was insanely high while they were in a blowout, which is really surprising, because if you're winning by a lot, why are you not taking your star running back out of the game? He was in for the entirety of this game. Even when they were up by 20, he was on this field. He saw 50 snaps compared to Elijah Mitchell's 10. And it looks like any bit of worry that you might have had that he's going to lose some volume to Mitchell is completely out the door now. But on to the Steelers side, Najee Harris, bit of a bad game for him. But I actually think Najee's a buy low candidate right now. Most people are going to look at this game and say, wow, Najee was not good at all. They blew them out. He had no work. Jaylen Warren took all of that from him. They split the backfield 50-50. But if you actually look at the game and the specific usage in each section of the game, they really only used Jaylen Warren when it started getting completely out of hand. Now, with that being said, if the Steelers look like this for the remainder of the season, they're probably going to be losing a decent amount, and maybe they'll just put Jaylen Warren in for all of these. But in the beginning of the game, when it was close, Najee was being used. So I really do think he's a decent buy low candidate. He's still not my favorite running back in the league. I definitely would take him under some other guys. But if you can get him low, just because of the scared Najee owners, I'd do it. But looking at the Vikings and Bucks game, another interesting one. The Bucks ended up coming out and winning this, keeping it close the entirety of the way. But despite a lackluster game from Rachaad White, fantasy-wise, his numbers were actually pretty decent. He was the clear third down back and pretty much got all of the work out of this backfield. He saw 52 snaps compared to Sean Tucker's 8. But the fantasy numbers did not match this usage, and these are the type of players we need to be hunting for when we're buying low. Now, obviously, this Baker Mayfield-led offense isn't great, but if he can continue to be a workhorse running back here, he might be worth a look. And looking at the Vikings, they're going to pass no matter what. It's just the identity of this team. Kirk Cousins threw 44 passes. Jefferson had 150 yards. Addison had 60 and a touchdown. All around good offensive game for them. KJ Osborne was involved a decent amount in snaps in this offense over Jordan Addison. This is a time to buy Jordan Addison if you haven't already. I mean, rookies start out slow. He's going to get more usage as the season goes on. The faster you can buy them and the earlier you can buy them, the better. Now, moving on to probably the most fun game to watch of the day, the Chargers and the Dolphins. And I have one thing to say about this, and that is Tyreek Hill. The man came out and had over 200 receiving yards on Tua's 466 passing yards on the day. That is absolutely insane. Tyreek Hill, I'd probably put him behind Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase as of right now in my fantasy rankings, maybe even higher if he continues this level of dominance. And if you played against Tyreek Hill this week in fantasy, I extremely apologize for that. There's nothing you can do. On the other hand, Jalen Waddle, not the best game for him. His day really got saved by a 40-yard reception. But if Tua's passing almost 500 yards a game and he can only get 70 of those, that's a little bit scary. But again, that's nothing we haven't expected before. This offense is going to continue to be a boomer bust for Jalen Waddle. Both of these wide receivers can never work in unison. It's always one or the other. Looking at the Chargers side of things, for the running back room, Josh Kelly had a lot more uses than we expected. Regardless, this is not going to move Austin Eckler down my rankings at all. He's still going to be the running back one. We saw he had a really good fantasy game today. It was a little surprising how much they use Kelly, though. You should definitely be rostering Kelly if you are an Eckler owner. But as of right now, it's just something to monitor. But the next game we're looking at is the Bears and Packers, which is a game that surprised me. The first reason for that is because Justin Fields threw for 37 pass attempts. Most ever. He's never thrown for that much. And that's a good sign for all these pass catchers, but the offense still didn't look great. Jair Alexander was on DJ Moore, which is an atrocious matchup for Moore, so he didn't really put up that many fantasy points. 2 receptions total, not great. I think this is a decent buy low spot for Moore. Again, I'm not sure how much we can trust this offense to where he can be startable, consistent guy every single week, but he's still a buy low candidate. Fields is still the best quarterback he's ever played with in his career, arguably. I wouldn't just trade him low and get rid of him, but onto the Packers side, I'm going to be the first to admit Jordan Love looked a lot better than I expected him to be. I've been doubting this offense for a little bit, but Love managed to be decent with a below average wide receiver core with no Christian Watson. As for fantasy, if Jordan Love can continue this level of offensive efficiency, I might have to take Christian Watson off my ban list, but that is for the future to decide. But again, the targets for this offense were very dispersed. Luke Musgrave, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, everybody kind of had a little bit. No one had over 3 receptions on the day, which is not good. Maybe this offense will open up as Jordan Love gets more comfortable, football right now, it's just the running back show, and Aaron Jones might be injured. Probably nothing big though. But looking at the Rams and Seahawks game, what a wake-up call for the people that don't watch these videos regularly. I've been telling you guys since the preseason, before Kupp was even injured, that Puka is going to be a guy we should be picking up off of waivers or drafting with our last pick anyways. And this came to fruition today. He saw 15 targets on over 100 yards, breaking all types of rookie records. Now that Cooper Kupp is missing 4 weeks indefinitely, he is going into the clear Cooper Kupp role, and I think once Kupp comes back, he's still going to have a decent amount of volume. Now, you do have to say he's not going to keep up this level of production every single week. I mean, 100 yards is just insane. Also, Matthew Stafford looked really, really good. That's probably going to come down a little bit, but he's still definitely a viable wide receiver waiver option. But if we're looking at the running backs, Cam Akers, absolutely atrocious. Not surprised, he's never been efficient. He had 22 carries for only 29 yards. For anybody saying that Sean McVay hasn't trusted him yet, this should be your telltale sign that he does. He gave him the keys, 22 carries, absolutely nothing done with it. Kyren Williams had all of the goal line work, and he had 15 carries. The Rams didn't even really run away with this game, and he was still getting volume. Not a good sign for Akers. Akers is still going to have a role in this offense, but if it's not in the red zone, and definitely not in the receiving game, how much fantasy value can he really have? Akers has never really been a receiving back. Kyren Williams ran 80% of the routes out of this backfield compared to Cam. Again, not another good sign. And looking at the Seahawks, Geno was not great. That is kind of surprising and a little bit worrisome for any Seahawks wide receiver owners. You have so many weapons and options on this offense, and you can't get over 150 passing yards. That is risky. If that continues, this entire wide receiver core is going to struggle. I mean, there's just so many options. If everyone's taking their piece of the pie and the pie is only this big, it's not good. I'm just quickly going to talk about this Giants game in one breath. I mean, they put up 0 points. Getting shut out like that is absolutely insane. It does pose a decently good buy low option for Saquon Barkley though. And if you played against the Cowboys defense, again, I'm extremely sorry for that. You probably ended up losing your league. But we can't really take away anything from this Giants team from this game because they were getting blown out. They were flustered. They couldn't get a first down. CD is still a top guy. Do not question that. Pollard looked really good. I mean, he got 20 fantasy points in a game that was blown out where he came out in the entire fourth quarter. So if we go over to the Eagles and Patriots game, this backfield for both teams was kind of confusing. I've been saying that I wanted to wait to play any of these Eagles running backs to see how it played out. They just signed Swift. They got Kenneth Gainwell. They got Boston Scott. They got Rashad Penny. Kenneth Gainwell outsnapped all of these running backs with 41 snaps compared to Swift at 19 and Boston Scott at 8. And Rashad Penny was a healthy scratch. Gainwell's only rostered in 34% of leagues. I think he's a good pickup, but I wouldn't drop Swift. Wait and see what he can do. It's only week 1. They signed him for a reason. But as for Ramondre Stevenson, we saw him split carries with Zeke 75-35. And for whatever reason, Zeke saw the majority of the targets out of this backfield. Now, a lot of people can look at this and panic on the usage of Ramondre Stevenson and be super worried, but the game script just did not follow Ramondre Stevenson. He still had double-digit fantasy points and just about met his projections. But if you were watching this game, they were not using him while they were losing this game. But when they started to come back, Ramondre Stevenson was the sole running back again. Apparently, Ramondre was also dealing with some kind of alleged sickness right before the game, so maybe that had something to do with his usage. But it is important to note that Zeke ran more routes out of the backfield than Ramondre. I really don't think you have to be worried about Ramondre because of this game. There's a whole bunch of outside factors. If you can get Ramondre low, now's the time to do it. But I really do appreciate you guys hanging around in this video. If you did get any kind of value from it, drop a like, but I will see you guys in the next video coming soon.